Hello, Nova Nation. It's WXVU Sports Director David Szczepanski here in the WXVU studio for today's Villanova versus Providence recap. We'll talk about that game against the Friars this past weekend on Saturday, and we'll also do a preview later on in this video for Villanova versus UConn tonight at the XL Center in Hartford, Connecticut. So we'll talk about that coming up in just a minute or so. But I want to talk about the Providence game. I didn't do a recap video, unfortunately, so I'm going to kind of do 2-in-1 in this video on this Tuesday afternoon before the UConn game later on tonight at 6:30. For Villanova, this was a really bad performance, probably their worst performance of the season in a game that they really needed to win. It was a must-win contest for Villanova to keep their at-large bid hopes alive. And even though they were slim still, they were getting closer to where they needed to be, kind of on the edge of that bubble. And really disappointing performance at the AMP in Rhode Island against this Providence Friars team that is okay, but definitely not a good basketball team. They're kind of on that line of average, especially without Bryce Hopkins. But they played really well in this game. They deserve a lot of credit. Final score, Providence 75, Villanova 62. And this was a game where the Friars, they got out to a hot start in the beginning of this game. That building, of course, regardless how good of a team Providence actually is, that building really helps the team get going, the home team there for the Friars. And it gave them a lot of energy. You could tell that when you were watching the game on TV against Villanova. Providence got out to a really hot start, and Villanova really didn't have any answers. It was kind of a non-competitive game. I mean, Providence, like I said, they got out to a early lead, and they just kept their foot on the gas. Villanova made a little bit of a run there, kind of early to midway in the second half, but nothing was really sustained. Villanova's offense really struggled in the first half, and in the second half, it was kind of a mixture of kind of inefficient offense, but also poor defense at times, especially perimeter defense. Providence shot almost 50% from behind the arc in this game. Villanova was 1 for 10 from behind the arc in their first 10 three-point attempts. So that kind of shows you how the early part of this game went, especially, with Providence hitting, threes and, knocking down their three-point shots, and Villanova's defense really struggling, but also their offense not able to score points. Luka Poplar, Jordan Longino both had 18 points. Eric Dixon had 15 points. But like I said, it was definitely one of the worst performances of the season for Villanova as they fell to 15-11, 8-7 in conference play. And hopefully they can quickly flush this loss. I mean, like I said, a few seconds ago, Villanova most likely now is without an at-large bid, right? And even when, the win against St. John's happened earlier last week, the hopes were still pretty low, right? You had, 10 losses entering the month of February, and Villanova, they were just not at a great spot, especially, considering how the selection committee was not favorable towards Big East teams last year. So Villanova still technically in that fifth place spot, but Xavier has caught up to them. They are tied in conference records. So that's still a battle here for Villanova to get that bye. And that's really what this end of the season has to be a fight for Villanova, is to get, that bye in the first round so you don't have to play on Wednesday night in the Big East tournament. And really the goal for Villanova is to win in Manhattan. They really have to, go the distance and win the championship. So a tough road ahead for Villanova, but they have to use these final few games to get ready and try to boost their resume as much as possible, to give themselves the best chance and kind of, I don't want to say practice, but, play competitively against some of the best teams, because they still have some tough tasks ahead against UConn tonight and also against Marquette on Friday. Let's talk about that UConn game tonight. Villanova will battle the Huskies at 6:30 p.m. And the Huskies are looking for revenge, not just off of that loss that they had against Villanova by 2 points at the Finn in early to middle of January, but also, the Huskies are coming off of a disappointing loss to the worst team in the conference, Seton Hall, at the Prudential Center over the weekend. So, Coach Hurley, who I'm sure was already disappointed after UConn was removed out of the latest AP Top 25 poll, then they lose to Seton Hall. And that team really doesn't lose back-to-back tough games like that very often, especially when they have one of those games at home against Villanova tonight. So keeping an eye on the Vegas odds for this game. Villanova was underdogs by about 8.5 points. That went to 9.5, at least according to the ESPN app earlier this morning. So that's something to keep an eye on there as UConn continues to be favored in those Vegas odds and pools. But this UConn team, we know how good they are, right? Even though Villanova was able to beat them, Alex Karaban missed 2 late free throws in that game. Eric Dixon scored 23 points. This UConn team is really good. I mean, when you look at their last few weeks, even though they lost to the Pirates, they've had some really good performances against teams like Creighton, against teams like Marquette, where they were able to pull out victories. They lost to St. John's, but they kept that game very close. But this UConn team, they're definitely not going away. Even though they haven't been ranked for the past week, they're still a really tough team. They are 17-8 overall this season, 9-5 in conference play. play. And, like you said, you just have to keep thinking about the revenge factor. They definitely want to get revenge on Villanova, but also after that disappointing loss against Seton Hall. Top scorers for this UConn team, Liam McNeely is back. Villanova did not face McNeely in that first matchup at the Finn where UConn lost by 2. So you think if he played, that probably was, the difference perhaps in that game. Don't want to say it was the difference, but it most likely could have been. McNeely off to a great start to his college career. He's just a freshman, averaging more than 15 points per game. But they also have Solo Ball as well as Alex Caraban, who are both averaging more than 14 points per game. So this UConn team, they can definitely score. They have some good pieces as well off the bench, or I should say, besides their top 3 scorers, Hassan Diarra also averaging around 9 points per game. UConn as a team averages 78 points per contest. Their defense is pretty interesting. They can play some good games at times. They give about 68 points per game this season, but they don't do a great job at forcing turnovers. They're giving up about 11 turnovers on offense per game. They're forcing about 10 turnovers, so they are a little bit behind in terms of that turnover ratio. But their defense, they will do a good job at times, but I think Villanova has the opportunity to shoot the ball well. I mean, you have to think Villanova is going to respond after that poor shooting performance, especially Villanova coming into that game against Providence, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the Big East. So you would hope that they would respond, but obviously, I mean, this Hartford, Connecticut environment, the XL Center tonight, is not going to be easy for Villanova. I mean, coming off of that ruckus environment, against Providence at the AMP, this UConn environment is probably even tougher to play in, so they have to be ready for that. You hope that Villanova responds, but these are two teams that are coming off of tough losses in games that they should have won. UConn against Seton Hall, as I said, Villanova against Providence. So both of these teams are desperately searching for a win, but also, I mean, the Wildcats, as I said earlier, they have to secure that top 5 bid to, get that bye on the first night of the Big East tournament coming up in March. Hope you enjoyed this Villanova preview video. Won't have any coverage on WXVU today. We're not in Connecticut, but I will have coverage on my social media, so stay tuned for that. I'm also going to post a preview article later this afternoon, so I'll post that on my social media as always. Again, Villanova versus UConn tonight. You can watch the game on FS1 beginning at 6:30. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, Nova Nation. Let's see if the Cats can sweep the tough UConn Huskies tonight. And as always, go Cats!